I am Jason. I'm the VP of Strategic Growth at Florida Best Quote, which means I'm just responsible to try to grow our business and develop us around the state. So I do a lot of traveling like today. It's always exciting to do things like that. I did want to talk to you a little bit about a couple things. I think the last time we met, we were at a point where the legislative session for the state was getting ready to end. And I think we didn't have a final answer on some things, if I remember correctly. So initially we were told there really was nothing of value that was passed. And technically that's kind of true, but there's a couple of things I guess we can bring up. One would be they did approve around $500 million statewide of normal fees and taxes that get applied to home insurance policies are being reduced statewide by around $500 million. Now that sounds like a big number, but when you spread it out throughout the entire state, it's at the most maybe $50 a policy, but that's still $50. So we haven't seen that reduction, but that was passed. So that's any little news is good news, I guess, when it comes to saving money. They did refund, I think it was $200 million they put back into the, it's the program where they encourage homeowners to, if you get some improvements done on your home, you get the, some, like put in some hurricane rated windows, they'll give you credits and help you pay for some of those improvements to your house. It was out of money this year and they refunded it for about $200 million. So now the only thing I would really stress on that is a lot of homeowners assume, unfortunately, incorrectly, that if they become a part of that grant that goes through the state and they turn around and I'm going to go put hurricane windows because the state's going to pay for a big chunk of it, they assume that's going to save them a lot of money on their home insurance. But I just want to remind you, as we talked about before, a wind mitigation inspection, that's what saves you money on your home insurance, right? What roof credits are you qualifying for? If you have your windows protected, that is not total protection. And there's a roof credit called opening protection, and it's pretty much an all or nothing roof credit. So we've talked to so many people that have gotten their windows hurricane rated, but their front door is not, their patio door is not, their skylight is not, their garage door is not. And so they've got half their house protected, but not the whole house. And then they get upset when it's not saving them money on their home insurance. So just be aware of that a lot of people are putting in hurricane rated windows because of this program that the state is offering. But there's some disappointed people out there when they realize that that's not all the openings in their house and it's not going to save them any money. So those are the two main legislative things that have a little bit of impact statewide. I wanted to talk to you about some good news and from the carriers as far as loosening underwriting guidelines, opening up zip codes. We actually have had some companies come in with some rate reductions recently. And then last night I was at an event that Olympus Insurance put on. And next week, and this is huge for a lot of your clients and my clients, next week they are introducing a program where they will cover solar panels at full replacement cost, including net metering, which is the one thing, if it's a tier 2 net metering, that's where they're attached to the grid and they're actually drawing power from the grid and putting power back into the grid and that sort of thing. It's not just their pool they're heating. There are almost no options that will accept that at all. And so we have become very bullish and maybe even negative about solar panels because there's just not any options out there for people, right? So Olympus is going to cover, and I would say they're my favorite company to write business with. They have the best coverage. They're not always the least expensive. They will write homes 40 years or older, but they're going to cover solar panels at replacement cost. They're going to cover it even if there's net metering, and they're going to cover starting next week Tesla roofs. They're going to cover solar panels that are tile roofs. So there's nobody else doing that. And this is they're coming into this niche to be the solar panel company. And we're pumped about it because nobody else is doing this. So just be aware of that solar panels don't have to be the big negative, but just be aware 40 years or older is their limit, or 40 years or newer is their limit. And then also just be aware of the fact that they're not always the least expensive option, but in my opinion, they're almost always the best option because of their claim service and because of their coverages. So what we end up doing a lot with them, what I've done in the past with them is I'll send out, here's your least expensive option, here's the recommended option, and then show people the difference and then let them decide if they want to pay the extra for it. It's the same thing we're doing right now with citizens policies. We'll send out a citizens policy. Here's the next best option that we would recommend for you because citizens is going to require you to have flood. And so those kind of conversations. So this is potentially a big game changer for the state because nobody wants to touch those things. And what they're willing to cover, nobody else is willing to do that. So it's an option, and people are going to be willing, I think, to pay a little extra to have coverage for their solar panels. And if they have a Tesla roof, they probably have enough money to, you know, to pay a little extra in home insurance. So that was the big news that we got. I'm just really excited because we were told that we were a year and a half away from any sort of stability. That's what at the legislative session, that's what the lobbyists for the home insurance companies were telling the legislature. It's a year and a half out till we're going to see some stabilization. But we're already seeing companies make a lot of underwriting guidelines. They want to write new business. I was at an event for an American Integrity 2 weeks ago, for Olympus yesterday. They all want to write new business, and they're putting out programs to try to write more business, which is great news for us in the state of Florida. I saw the chat come up. It's Olympus Insurance, and they're a great company. Any questions about that? I had one other real good piece of information as well. Any questions about that coverage or anything?
You mentioned the Tesla roof. I knew that it's new. That's new. Like it's been a few years old, right? Like they think it came out right before
Yes.
COVID. So do you want to talk a little bit about what that is and in case nobody's heard about the Tesla roof?
Well, I think that if my understanding, I've never seen one in person. I've just heard a lot about them. Nobody's been willing to touch them, which is kind of standard. A lot of companies kind of sit back and go, well, is anybody else going to cover this? Or is there danger in these things? I mean, what kind of liability is there? So the home insurance industry has been very slow to start saying, okay, we're cool with a Tesla roof. And really, there's very few, if any any competitive companies that have said, yes, we'll cover that and we'll offer an endorsement for that. But I would just say that it is a new thing, like you were saying, and everyone's slow to start covering it. So for them to come out and say, yes, we're going to cover a Tesla roof. I've only heard one other update like that. I don't remember offhand who the company was, but in the last 6 months or so, one other company has said they'll start writing Tesla. But so this is just a huge game changer for us.
Hey, Jason, I had one question about your previous topic where you were talking about having to be careful, like with the windows and the doors and garage door and all that. Like you need to have all of it, or it's not really going to give you any credits. Let's just say somebody does have like it up to hurricane standards for their windows, doors, garage door, all that. How much does that save them? Like, I mean, does it save them 10% on a premium?
Right.
20? Is there a rule of thumb? See if it's even worth it.
Yeah. Okay. So that is a great question, and I've got a good answer for you on that. So because we write with so many companies, every company's different, right? I have always told people that the savings are not worth, like, don't go spend thousands of dollars to protect your home thinking that I'm going to spend $5,000, $6,000 or whatever it is so that I can save a massive amount of money on my home insurance. For the longest time, the discounts could be $50 a year, $150 a year. I mean, like nothing.
Oh my word.
Even right now, the company that has and I hate to even say this, the company that has the biggest difference that will make hundreds and hundreds, potentially $1,000-something worth of difference is Citizens. So they're the company that has the really big discount for opening protection. Most of the other companies, it's not a massive discount. So I just tell people, if they ask me, get your windows and your openings protected for your house and for the safety of your family. Don't do it thinking you're going to save a massive amount of money on your home insurance, because most of the time it will not be the case unless it's Citizens, and a lot of times they do have a big discount for it. And then lastly, I'll just bring up one other topic, and this is really great news as well. We have 2 companies that have begun to be very competitive with Citizens that were not competitive with Citizens before. But Sage Shore, I think, is the name of one of them that that we've just recently been appointed with. They are coming up regularly competitive with Citizens. So Citizens has that rule now, the 20% rule we might have talked about before, where if there's any other option out there that's within 20% of their premium, they are ineligible. You cannot write with them. Okay. So they're sending out these letters to their clients saying, hey, we found another option. They are 19% more than us, but you've got to take it because we're not going to let you write with us. That's their 20% rule. So
and you
this
might
is
as well
huge.
do that now, especially with you
Yes.
saying that they're going to start requiring flood insurance. You know, I mean, so you're really not saving anything by going with them.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and I would say I'd say there's a lot of truth in that most of the time. So that's why we would like, a lot of times we'll send out Citizens and the flood quote, and then here's your next best option without flood, and then just let people decide. But Slide and Sage Shore, I'm pretty sure Sage Shore is the way to say that, are the 2 companies that have begun to be competitive with Citizens on a lot of the older homes. We have not been able to say that for years. So, so that's more great news that's out there. So companies are coming back. They're wanting to write business, which is great news for us. And it's really good news for y'all as well, because we're going to write more business, and it should save some deals when the DTI is the issue, right? A lot of times on some of these insurance quotes. So if we can find some options for clients that are better for them than Citizens, and they can still qualify under that DTI rule that y'all have, then it's a win-win for both of us. So we're really pumped. And I'm not used to giving good news. So this is like, it's a whole new thing for me, right? Like for the last 3 years, when I go and speak at events, I usually throw out a dad joke because I know I'm going to give them bad news. I'm just trying to get them in a good mood, or before I drop the bomb on everybody. So this is really great stuff that we're starting to hear from a lot of the companies. So I just wanted to share some of that with y'all this morning.
Can you repeat those 2 names again, please?
That we're becoming competitive.
Yes. Was it Slide and Safe? What were you? Yeah.
Okay, let me make sure that I've got that correct. I'm pretty sure it is Sage, because we just got appointed to them not too long ago. Sage Shore. Yeah, I was saying it right. So Sage, S-A-G-E, Shore, S-U-R-E. So those are the 2 companies that we've begun to be that, and I'm not saying they're competitive in every instance. Please don't say that, but they're competitive enough to where it's worth bringing up in something like this and for us to talk about it. So.
And that's Slide and Sage Shore, correct?
Yes, and Slide was the company that was taking on a lot of the business from Citizens when Citizens was, well, they're still doing it, when they've been issuing these the depopulation letters where they're trying to get you to move to another company. Slide was one of the companies that we were writing a lot with them, or they were pushing people out to, and a lot of times those rates were not competitive. And now we're starting to see some of those rates become more competitive. So
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Jason, in the chat, somebody was asking, what's the rule with Citizens when they're going to be requiring flood insurance?
Okay, so right now, if you are in a flood zone where a lender, you guys would require flood insurance, so A, AE, V, VE, if you're in one of those flood zones, it's already required, right? So who that impacts are the people that don't have mortgages, people that bought by cash and they just didn't have to get, I don't have to get flood insurance even though my house is 10 feet from the water, right? So all those people are required now. So we're in the middle right now of all those people that have Citizens policies at their renewals from this past June to this coming June. All those policies are being required to get flood insurance at their renewals. The big rule, and this is the huge one, is over the next 4 years, all the clients with X flood zones, those are the ones where you wouldn't require them to get flood insurance, right? It's a low enough risk where you guys would not require it. And people can opt out of not getting it. They don't have to get it. Citizens is going to require all those clients to get it. January 1st of this year, it's already started, right? But they're staggering it by the amount of coverage on the policy, which is, I really appreciate the fact that they're doing it that way. So it's impacting the people that could potentially afford it the least. It's going to put them out into the future. So if the big example would be, if your dwelling coverage on the home, the replacement cost of the home is $300,000 or less, you're not going to be required to get flood insurance until January of 2027. Okay. So in 2024, 25, 26, and 27, it drops $100,000 every year. So right now, as of January of this year, anybody with a Citizens policy that has coverage of 600,000 to 700,000, all those clients this year, if they're in an X flood zone, have to get flood insurance. They're the ones who could probably afford it the most. That's what they're doing. And then next year, January of 2025, if it's $500,000 or above, you're going to have to get it. 2026, if it's $400,000 or above. So it's dropping every year. So the people that can afford it the least, that $300,000 dwelling coverage or below, they're not going to be required to do it until 2027. So there is some good news in that.
Does it matter what type of flood coverage they have? Do they have to have the NFIP, or can they use a private flood carrier?
No, they're not required. It does not have to be an NFIP policy. The only requirement, and this is impacting a lot of people as well, it has to match the Citizens up to $250,000. It has to match the dwelling coverage. The big thing that a lot of people are not aware of, the contents coverage has to match. So many people out there wrote flood policies with zero contents coverage because that was a way to save money. Now, all these new policies and all these renewals that are coming up, with people getting required to get it, if they already have flood coverage, they're not necessarily safe. If they zeroed out their contents coverage at their renewal, they have to add contents coverage up to the amount of their Citizens contents coverage. And that can be hundreds and hundreds of dollars extra. So again, this is just another reason, and there's at least 10 of them out there, why Citizens is trying to not write new business, right? They've sent out 500,000 of those letters to try to get people to move out of their company since November of last year. And, this is the first time they've dropped in a number of policies. They've gone from 1.4 million to right now that are about 1.2 million policies in the state of Florida. They should not have that many. So they've sent out letters to almost half of their database, trying to move them to other companies. So just be aware of that.
They don't have to have contents coverage.
No, but if you have Citizens, you're going to be required to have it as part of your flood policy, and it has to match the contents coverage on the Citizens home insurance policy.
But if you only elect to have $10,000 of contents coverage on your homeowner insurance policy, or 20,000 or 30,000, whatever you can elect to have whatever you want on there, right?
Yeah, if you don't have a Citizens home insurance policy, it doesn't matter. Okay. You can zero it out or have, now some of the companies have increments. They're not going to let you have $33,450 of contents coverage. I mean, they'll have increments that you have to select, usually in the $10,000 increments. But yeah, as long as you don't have Citizens, you don't have to have contents coverage for flood. But if you have Citizens, they're requiring it.
Could you do a synopsis of what you just said? I'd love to be able to share that information with some of my clients that I do know have Citizens.
For the flood thing? Flood?
Just what you just went through and what the changes are going to be, the cost of the house or the value of the house, and how that's going to be progressive. I mean, I would love to just digest that a little better than how you just spewed that out so eloquently. But
I have a slide of that.
That would be perfect.
I have a slide of that in a flood presentation. I do a slide that has that entire breakdown by dates and by amounts of when flood insurance is being required by Citizens.
One question in the chat, they were asking, do you know any idea of the rate of the flood insurance? And I think you answered that a few weeks or a couple months ago, where you don't know what the flood rate's going to be. That's going to be tied to even though it's in a flood zone X, it still might not be the cheap policy that it used to be of $300 to $400 for the year, right?
Exactly. Back in 2022, when they went to flood risk rating 2.0, when the whole NFIP flood insurance system or flood rating system completely changed. That's back when they started not requiring elevation certificates anymore like they used to. Distance to the coast became huge, right? Value of the home, the higher the value of the home, the higher the rate. That changed everything around flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program when they did that. And the big thing they did in the past, and you're right, in the past, the X flood zone rates were set for it was the exact same, and it was just based on how much coverage you had. That is not the case anymore. So the closer you are to the coast, the higher the value of the home. If you're in an X flood zone, your rates are most likely going to be a lot higher than you think. I've seen them up to almost $2,000 in an X flood zone based on maybe they had $1 million worth of coverage or $1 million home, 3/4 of a mile from the ocean or from the Gulf, but they were in an AE flood or they were in an X flood zone because it was built up. They're still paying high. So yeah, the X flood zone rates are not set like they used to be, and they can be higher depending on how close to the coast you are and how much value your home has.
The content being equal to the dwelling, I mean, that's huge that people have to do that.
Well, no, the content not equal to the dwelling. So it's the
Okay.
contents on the flood insurance have to be equal to the contents coverage on the home insurance.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's
okay.
probably what you meant. I mean,
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So if a home insurance, but remember, this is all just Citizens, but if your Citizens
Right.
policy has $75,000 of contents coverage, personal
Right.
property coverage, you have to have $75,000 of contents coverage for your flood insurance policy as well. Remember,
Wow.
this is another reason why we're excited that we're starting to find some options that are competitive with Citizens, or at least not double Citizens, right? So
Right,
that people
right.
will have the option to switch out of Citizens, because that's ultimately what we want them to do. We don't want to write Citizens. It's not that they're a horrible company. They just have too much business. They're not supposed to have 1.2 million customers in Florida. So
Right.
the more that we can get people away from Citizens, that's what we want to do.
Good. Thank you.
Ethan, I have a question. Shawn was asking about on a homeowner's insurance. So if you don't want contents coverage on your homeowner's insurance policy, is that required with Citizens that you have to have a minimum amount of contents coverage on the homeowner's insurance policy?
That is a good question. I would, with Citizens specifically, I think you do. I would say probably 90% of the companies require you to have some sort of contents coverage. And sometimes it's a percentage of the dwelling coverage, and sometimes you can lower it. The standard that's usually the lowest allowed is 25% of whatever the dwelling coverage is. So if you've got a $400,000 house, you're going to have $100,000 of contents coverage. That's like how it is for most companies. But again, this is where we have almost 50 home insurance companies. They all have different guidelines. Some of them will let you set a low amount. There are companies that will let you zero it out. I don't think Citizens is one of those companies, though.
Okay.
But honestly, I'm not 100% sure of that. I haven't written Citizens in about a year, so I will have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure they make you have some contents coverage.
Jason, this has been super informative. As always, we appreciate you taking your time to be with us.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all too.